Hey everybody, I'm here at the Holiday Inn Express in Hiawassee, Georgia. Looks like I'm going to be stuck here for a day or two, just pretty much waiting out some pretty severe weather that's supposed to be coming through here in the mountains. So I thought I'd go ahead and take this opportunity to update you on how my thru-hike's been going so far. All right, on March 5th, 2017, as planned, I started my thru-hike of the AT. I started at the base of the falls at Amicalola Falls State Park, climbed the steps, I think there's 625 steps, and then started the approach trail, which you can actually get a shuttle up to the lodge and start the approach trail there if you don't want to do the approach trail with the steps on your legs. And I'm here to tell you that approach trail is just as difficult as everybody says that it is. In fact, what you're seeing here, I'm pretty sure that's the only flat section on that entire approach trail. At least it's the only flat section that I remember. All right, the hike up to Springer Mountain from the Black Gap shelter really wasn't all that bad. I'd have to say the descent was a little more challenging. It was a lot more rocky anyways to descend down into the parking lot. Once you got to the parking lot though, for probably 3 miles, the trail really mellowed out. It made for a really nice hike. In fact, it kind of gave you a false sense of what the AT is all about, but I wasn't complaining. It was just a beautiful walk. So I decided to go ahead and take lunch at the Stover Creek shelter, and that's where a few hours into my hike, I met a couple of criminals from Indiana that I've actually been hiking with ever since. And from the Stover Creek shelter, it was actually a pretty mellow hike until you started climbing up towards where Long Creek Falls is. And Long Creek Falls is just beautiful. It's just off the AT. We saw the sign for it and didn't know how far of a trail it would be, so we considered not even going to it. But I mean, it's literally steps off the AT. So if you get an opportunity, you definitely need to go down there and check it out. So day 3 got a little bit interesting. We knew that there was a chance of rain, and our original plan was to hike from the Hawk Mountain campsites into the Gooch Mountain shelter. And it actually started out just really foggy. There wasn't really any kind of rain going on or anything like that. So it was good hiking. And about, I would say 12:30, 1 o'clock, it started raining. And at first it was just kind of spitting on us. It wasn't too bad at all, and we had Sassafras Mountain to go over that day, which is actually the first pretty steep, substantial mountain that you go over on the AT. And as we were descending Sassafras Mountain, the bottom dropped out. It started raining pretty hard, and it was pretty cold. So we got down to the gap down there at the base of Sassafras, and it was just pouring down rain. We couldn't even take a lunch break. So we started climbing up the mountain that's just behind it. I don't remember the name of the mountain. But when we got to, there was actually like a cave that was about halfway up the mountain that we were able to get under and have lunch, and it worked out really well, actually. So when we got to the Gooch Mountain shelter, basically it was completely full. There was no tent sites. There were people tenting on very slanted ground. There was a guy there that actually told us that if we went about another 1.5 miles, it actually takes you down into Gooch Gap. And he also told us that there was trail magic going on down there, and there was also a water source. So we decided we'd go ahead and push forward another 1.5 miles, even though we were all exhausted and soaking wet, and it was still pouring down rain at this time. You know, to maybe get some trail magic and camp down there at the gap since there was a water source. So I'd say it was probably 1.25 miles into the 1.5 mile hike down to Gooch Gap that we ran into some other through hikers that were heading southbound back to the shelter that had basically gone down to Gooch Gap to take advantage of the trail magic, that unfortunately let us know that the trail magic was packing up and they were pretty much done for the day. So we were pretty demoralized. However, when we had got off the trail and we had come into Gooch Gap, there was a guy carrying 2 pizzas up, and I mean, that man was awesome. He offered us a couple of pizzas. He told us that there was a cooler in the bed of his truck with cold drinks, and he had another pizza that he was actually hiking in the 1.5 miles in the rain up to the Gooch Mountain shelter to share with the other hikers. So that was just a huge morale boost, and thank you so much for doing that. So day 4, the plan was to go from Gooch Gap to the Lance Creek Restoration Area, and we were going to camp down there at the Lance Creek Restoration Area. Man, what a difference a day makes. It was a beautiful day. Right off the bat, we had just beautiful views. The weather was just, I mean, the temperature was just perfect. We couldn't have asked for a better day, and we were able to make really good time. I believe that we got into the Lance Creek Restoration Area at about 1:30 and got some prime camping spots. So day 5, the plan was to hike from the Lance Creek Restoration Area into Neal Gap. We planned to take a 0 at Neal Gap and just get some rest, and we were hoping to get a cabin at the Blood Mountain Cabins since we had heard so many good things about the place in the past. So the climb up Blood Mountain was really not all that bad, and I'd always heard that the climb up Blood Mountain wasn't as bad as the descent, and I have to say that's absolutely true. The climb up Blood Mountain, with the exception of a short section in the very beginning where there's steps built out of stone, they have a pretty high rise that are kind of challenging to get up. After that, it's not that bad. You even have little areas where it levels out a little bit. However, the descent off of Blood Mountain, man, it's something else. It's to date the hardest descent that we've done. So when we got to Neal Gap, we decided to go ahead and check on availability of a cabin down at Blood Mountain Cabins. I highly recommend that place. Basically, once you get to Neal Gap, if you just take a right and walk down the road about 100 yards, you'll see a little path off to the left that says Trail to Blood Mountain Cabins. Just take that little trail down. It'll take you right down to the office. Luckily, they did have availability, and we were able to 0 there, so we stayed there for 2 nights. That place was awesome. I can't say enough about it. It was extremely affordable. There was 4 of us in a cabin that was plenty comfortable for 4 people, and it turned out to be $18 per person per night. So for $36 we were able to stay there for 2 nights. The place was extremely clean. I highly recommend the food there. Even if you're not going to stay there, when you come through Neal Gap, you know, if you've got the energy, instead of getting a frozen pizza or something like that at Neal Gap, or that real slim food selection that they have at the Outfitter, walk down to the Blood Mountain Cabins and they'll cook pizzas there for you. They have wings. They have all kinds of candy and Slim Jims and resupply, and it's all very reasonably priced. Cannot recommend that place enough. So the plan for day 7 was to hike from Neal Gap to the Low Gap shelter. The climb out of Neal Gap, while yes, it is a climb, it's really not all that bad. But if you're going from Neal Gap to Low Gap shelter, I'm going to warn you, that is a tough hike. There's just a lot of elevation gain and loss throughout that hike. There's really no easy section that I can remember, and it's about an 11.5 mile day. It took us quite a while to do it, but it's doable. Just keep in mind that it's pretty difficult to do. On day 8 at the Low Gap shelter, we woke up to this beautiful snow. There was a lot of people. Of course, everybody's out here with 3 seasons set up, so there was a lot of people that had to get out of their tents in the middle of the night and clear the snow. I got lucky. The design of my tent, which is the Z-Pax Duplex, is pretty much set up so that I could just knock the snow off from the inside of the tent, so I didn't have to worry about my tent collapsing or having to get out of my tent to clear the snow. So that day we decided to go from Low Gap shelter to the Blue Mountain shelter. As you can see, it was just a beautiful hike. The first half of the hike was actually pretty easy. It was a pretty good rolling terrain. There was nothing steep. The snow just made everything beautiful. However, the second half of the hike, it gets pretty steep, and by that time there had been enough hikers through there that the trail had started to get pretty muddy and pretty slick. So on day 9, we just decided to do the 2-mile hike from Blue Mountain Shelter down into Unicoi Gap. Soon as we got into Unicoi Gap, we got lucky enough to get a ride into Hiawassee. A guy basically pulled up and offered us a ride. I think it's about 10 miles from Unicoi Gap into Hiawassee. Real nice guy.
And then you get up there to top of Standing Indian, and you go for miles. You get to Albert Mountain, but about 2 or 3 miles before you get to Albert Mountain, you start going up climbs. Albert Mountain itself is like almost a sheer rock face. 3/10 of a mile, you got a tower, your first fire tower on top of it, Albert Mountain. You get on top of Albert Mountain, it's not bad until you get to Winding Stair Gap. Then Winding Stair Gap all the way to I-40 is tough. Now, Winding Stair Gap, you'll go up quite a bit. You go across another, one by day's hike from there. You get to Waya Ball, then go out past it about half a mile. You come to Waya Ball shelter off to the right, get your water left before we get to it to save you some time. And then you can hike from there into Downhill Outdoor Center.
Well, thanks everybody for watching. If you have any questions for me, just leave them down in the comments and I'll try to get to them, and I'll update you at my next stop.